teen boy fixes a flat tire for a millionaire. Months later, he's invited to an event that changes his life forever. The scorching summer sun beat down on the empty country road, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. A sleek black Range Rover sat helplessly on the shoulder, its rear tire completely flat. Andrew Morrison, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit that was now dampened with sweat, fumbled with the tire iron, his manicured hands unaccustomed to manual labor. His phone lay useless on the passenger seat, no signal, no help coming. Through the heat waves rising from the pavement, a figure appeared on a bicycle. It was Jamal Thompson, a 16-year-old boy pedaling home from his after-school job, his worn backpack heavy on his shoulders. He could have easily ridden past, many would have. Instead, he slowed down, noticing the distinguished-looking Asian-American man's obvious distress. "Need some help," Sir Jamal called out, his young voice carrying a confidence that belied his years. Andrew looked up, hesitation and relief warring on his face as he assessed the African-American teenager before him. In that brief moment of connection, neither could have known that this chance encounter would unravel a web of corruption, challenge deep-seated prejudices, and ultimately change both their lives forever. "Hey guys, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like button. Let's connect and see how far this story travels together." In the heart of Millbrook, a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Philadelphia, 16-year-old Jamal Thompson's day began long before sunrise. Every morning he would quietly slip out of the modest two-bedroom apartment he shared with his mother Sarah and younger sister Angela, careful not to wake them as he headed to his morning job at Joe's Mini Mart. The darkness before dawn was his constant companion, much like the weight of responsibilities that sat heavily on his young shoulders. Sarah Thompson, a former hospital administrator turned cleaning lady, worked 3 jobs since her husband's imprisonment. Her once confident stride had been replaced by a weary shuffle, but her dignity remained unbroken. Each night she would secretly tuck away a few dollars into an old coffee tin hidden behind the kitchen cupboard, her desperate attempt to save for Jamal's college education, even as bill collectors hounded them relentlessly. Michael Thompson, Jamal's father, had been the family's anchor until 2 years ago. As head mechanic at Carter's Automotive, he had built a reputation for honesty and exceptional skill. His arrest for alleged embezzlement had shocked the entire community. "Keep your head high, son," were his last words to Jamal before being led away in handcuffs. The truth always finds its way to the light, despite mounting evidence suggesting his innocence. The local justice system, seemingly eager to close the case, had sentenced him to 15 years. The garage where Jamal had apprenticed under his father's guidance became a source of both comfort and pain. Robert Carter, the owner, had initially kept Jamal on after Michael's arrest, perhaps out of guilt or community pressure. But 3 months ago, when $500 went missing from the register, Carter had publicly accused Jamal, despite security cameras being conveniently broken that day. The firing came swiftly, accompanied by whispers and sidelong glances from neighbors who had known the Thompsons for years. The incident had rippled through their small community. Sarah lost her hospital cleaning job the following week. Budget cuts, they claimed, though the timing spoke volumes. Angela, once a bright presence in her middle school, started eating lunch alone as former friends drifted away, their parents suddenly uncomfortable with the association. Yet Jamal refused to bend under the weight of injustice. His father's lessons lived in his hands, the ability to diagnose an engine's ailment by its sound, to coax life back into rusted machinery, to find elegant solutions to complex mechanical problems. Every night, after his evening shift at the local diner, he would spend hours in their small garage, repairing neighbors' cars for whatever they could afford to pay. Some paid in home-cooked meals, others in promises to pay later. Jamal accepted it all with the same quiet dignity his mother displayed. His bedroom walls told the story of his dreams, not with posters of athletes or musicians, but with carefully preserved magazine clippings about automotive innovation and engineering. His prized possession was a dog-eared notebook filled with his father's handwritten notes on car repair, supplemented by Jamal's own careful observations and sketches. Despite maintaining straight A's and ranking 3rd in his class, college seemed an increasingly distant dream as bills mounted and opportunities dwindled. The inheritance his father had left him wasn't just mechanical knowledge, it was an unshakable belief in justice and the courage to face each day with determination. Even as the weight of their circumstances threatened to crush them, Jamal remembered his father's words about truth and light. He carried this belief with him everywhere, along with the small silver wrench his father had given him on his 13th birthday, a reminder that the tools to rebuild one's life were always within reach. In the pre-dawn hours as he cycled between jobs, Jamal would often talk to his father in his mind, sharing his fears, his hopes, and his unwavering determination to prove their family's honor. The early morning air, thick with the scent of possibility, was his only witness as he pedaled through the sleeping streets of Millbrook, carrying not just his own dreams, but the weight of his family's redemption on his young shoulders. Andrew Morrison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, gazing at the Philadelphia skyline he'd helped reshape. At 52, he was the embodiment of the American dream, CEO of Morrison Technologies, a self-made millionaire whose face graced business magazines. Yet behind his carefully cultivated image lay a man haunted by the shadows of his past and the price of his success. Born to Chinese immigrants who ran a modest laundromat in San Francisco's Chinatown, Andrew had learned early about society's invisible barriers. His father's endless reminders, work twice as hard, be twice as good, had become his life's mantra. The memory of his parents' bent backs as they pressed other people's clothes had driven him through Stanford Business School, past sneers and stereotypes, to the pinnacle of corporate America. But success had extracted its pound of flesh. His marriage to Elizabeth, once built on shared dreams and midnight conversations over cheap takeout, had crumbled under the weight of his ambition. Their son Brandon, now 25, viewed him with a mixture of resentment and contempt. "You're just another sellout," Brandon had spat during their last argument, too busy climbing the corporate ladder to remember where you came from. The words had cut deeper than Andrew cared to admit, partly because they echoed his own growing unease. Somewhere along his ascent, he'd forgotten his father's other lessons about dignity and compassion. The corporate culture he'd built at Morrison Technologies, praised for its efficiency, had become a crucible where young talents were forged or broken. He'd rationalized every harsh decision, every denied promotion, every strategic partnership with questionable entities as necessary for survival in a cutthroat world. His involvement with the Carson Group, a powerful consortium of business interests, had started innocently enough networking events, golf games, mutual favors. Only later did he realize he'd become entangled in a web of influence, peddling, and corruption that reached into City Hall and the justice system. The recent contract awards, the convenient regulatory oversights, the swift resolution of problematic situations all carried a price tag he'd chosen not to examine too closely. His executive assistant, Margaret, was the only one who glimpsed behind his careful facade. She'd been with him since the start, when Morrison Technologies operated from a converted warehouse. She saw how he lingered over personnel files of minority candidates, how his hands sometimes shook after board meetings where he'd approved another round of efficiency measures, how he kept a worn photo of his parents' laundromat in his desk drawer. The corporate kingdom he'd built employed thousands, but Andrew couldn't remember the last time he'd had a genuine conversation with any of them. His calendar was a fortress of 15-minute slots, his relationships measured in shareholders' returns and strategic advantages. The young man who'd once dreamed of creating something meaningful had somehow become what he'd most despised, a man who valued expedience over ethics. Recent dreams had begun to disturb his sleep, his father's disappointed gaze, his mother's work-worn hands folding and refolding clean sheets, Brandon's childhood drawings of a family growing increasingly distant. The Carson Group's latest proposal regarding city contracts lay unopened on his desk, its implications weighing on his conscience like lead. His own face stared back at him from the latest business magazine cover. Andrew Morrison, the art of corporate excellence, the photographer, had captured his trademark half-smile, the perfect Windsor knot of his tie, the confident pose that inspired trust and respect. What the photo couldn't show were the compromises, the rationalizations, the slow erosion of principles that had brought him to this height. As he turned back to his desk, Andrew caught sight of a group of janitorial staff leaving the building far below the invisible army that kept his corporate empire running. They reminded him of his parents, of all the dreams they'd sacrificed for his success. Something stirred in his chest, a long dormant ember of the idealism he'd once possessed. But like so many previous moments of reflection, he pushed it aside as his phone buzzed with another urgent meeting reminder. The machinery of his success demanded constant attention, leaving no room for the luxury of conscience. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across County Road 23, where Andrew Morrison's Range Rover sat helplessly tilted to one side. The irony wasn't lost on him, a man who commanded a corporate empire, defeated by a simple flat tire. His Italian leather shoes, already scuffed from his futile attempts at changing the tire, sank slightly into the softening asphalt. The tire iron felt alien in his manicured hands, a stark reminder of how far he'd drifted from his humble beginnings. He'd dismissed his driver that morning, craving the solitude of a solo drive to clear his head after another contentious board meeting. Now, with no cell service and his pride preventing him from walking to the nearest service station, he stood sweating through his $3,000 suit. The sound of bicycle wheels on pavement drew his attention. Through the heat waves rising from the road, he saw a young African-American teenager approaching. Andrew's first instinct, shaped by years of boardroom prejudices and media stereotypes, was to tense up. He found himself unconsciously reaching for his wallet, ready to either offer money or protect it. Jamal Thompson slowed his bicycle, taking in the scene before him. The man's expensive clothes and luxury vehicle spoke of a world far removed from his own, but the frustrated helplessness in his stance was universal. For a moment, Jamal hesitated. His mother's warnings about being careful in isolated situations with strangers echoed in his mind. The recent incident at Carter's garage had taught him how quickly people could judge and condemn based on appearance alone. "Need some help, Sir?" Jamal's voice carried across the distance, steady and clear. The man looked up, surprise and uncertainty flickering across his features. "I know a thing or two about cars," Jamal added, already dismounting his bicycle. Andrew's response caught in his throat. The boy's confident demeanor didn't match his worn jeans and second-hand backpack. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got roadside assistance coming," he lied, his pride wrestling with his predicament. Jamal's keen eye had already assessed the situation. "Sir, your jack isn't positioned correctly. That's why you can't get the tire up." He moved closer, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "My dad taught me every car's got its sweet spot for lifting. This model's is about 2 inches behind where you've got it." The precision of the observation caught Andrew off guard. He watched as Jamal expertly repositioned the jack, his young hands moving with the assured confidence of someone who'd done this countless times. "Your father's a mechanic?" Andrew found himself asking. A shadow crossed Jamal's face. Was he said, simply focusing on the task at hand? The jack lifted smoothly under his adjustment, the car rising steadily. Andrew stood back, a mixture of admiration and embarrassment washing over him as Jamal efficiently removed the flat tire. As he worked, Jamal quietly explained each step, the way his father had taught him. His voice carried the same patient tone Michael Thompson had used countless times in their garage. The memory brought an unexpected lump to his throat, which he masked by wiping sweat from his brow. Andrew found himself drawn into the boy's methodical process. There was something almost meditative about watching skilled hands at work. It reminded him of watching his own father pressing clothes with precise, careful movements. The parallel struck him unexpectedly, stirring something long dormant in his chest. Within 15 minutes, the spare tire was secured and the flat carefully stowed in the trunk. Jamal's hands were smudged with dirt and grease, but his face showed the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Andrew reached for his wallet, pulling out several $100 bills. "I really appreciate your help. Please take this for your trouble." Jamal looked at the offered money, then back at Andrew. "No need for that, sir." Anyone would have done the same. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving grease marks that his mother would later scrub at with resigned determination. Besides, he added with a slight smile, "My dad always said good karma comes back around." The simple refusal of payment, delivered without pretense or expectation, hit Andrew with unexpected force. In his world of calculated moves and reciprocal favors, such genuine kindness had become foreign. He watched as Jamal mounted his bicycle, wondering what twist of fate had placed this young man on his path today. Over the next few days, Andrew found himself unable to shake the memory of the roadside encounter. During a routine meeting with his contacts at City Hall, he casually inquired about Carter's automotive. The reaction, a slight stiffening of shoulders, exchanged glances piqued his investigative instincts honed by years of corporate dealings. What emerged was a tapestry of small-town corruption that made his stomach turn. Robert Carter, the garage owner, was deeply connected to the local power structure through his brother-in-law, Deputy Mayor James Wilson. The garage served as a front for money laundering operations, processing fraudulent repair claims for the city's vehicle fleet. Michael Thompson, as head mechanic, had unknowingly stumbled upon discrepancies in the billing records. The story of Jamal's firing unfolded like a carefully orchestrated play. The missing $500 was planted by Carter himself, a preemptive strike against the son of a man who knew too much. Security cameras hadn't malfunctioned, the footage was deliberately erased. The local newspaper, dependent on city advertising revenue, had buried the story on page 6. Local youth terminated for theft. No mention of his perfect work record, his father's situation, or the suspicious timing. Sarah Thompson's subsequent job loss at the hospital revealed another thread in the tapestry. The facility's cleaning contract had recently been awarded to a company owned by Wilson's cousin. Her termination came with a clear message: stay quiet, accept your fate, or things could get worse. The ripple effects touched every aspect of the Thompson family's life. Credit applications mysteriously denied, rental applications rejected, even Angela's school scholarship review, a mere formality given her excellent grades, had been postponed indefinitely. The system's message was clear: once marked, every door would close. Andrew's investigation revealed a pattern of similar incidents across town. Small businesses pressured into protection arrangements. Building permits delayed without explanation. Health inspections weaponized against those who wouldn't play along. The Carson Group, his own business associates, had their fingerprints all over these operations, though carefully hidden behind layers of shell companies and proxy arrangements. The final piece clicked into place during a conversation with Margaret, his assistant. She'd grown up in Millbrook and remembered Michael Thompson from high school. He was the one who helped my mother when her car broke down, she recalled. Wouldn't take a dime for the repair. Said it was just the right thing to do. Her voice caught as she added, nobody who knew him believed the embezzlement charges. The parallels between Michael Thompson's roadside assistance years ago and Jamal's recent help struck Andrew with uncomfortable clarity. Here was a family that preserved its dignity and principles despite systematic oppression, while he, with all his power and resources, had become complicit in the very system that crushed people like them. The evidence against Michael Thompson had been circumstantial at best. Bank records showing deposits that matched missing funds, testimony from witnesses who later received city contracts, a rush trial with an overworked public defender. The pieces had been arranged too perfectly, the outcome predetermined. Jamal's situation at Carter's garage was a mirror of his father's case, another honest man punished for the crime of integrity. The staged theft, the convenient absence of evidence, the swift judgment without appeal, all designed to remind the community of the price of defiance. Andrew sat in his office late into the night, surrounded by printouts and notes. The corporate empire he'd built suddenly felt hollow, its foundation resting on compromises he could no longer justify. The face in his reflection seemed older, weighted with the knowledge of his indirect participation in countless similar injustices. His phone buzzed another message from the Carson Group about an upcoming project. The coded language about community cooperation and streamlined approvals now read like what it was, a blueprint for systematic exploitation. For the first time in years, Andrew remembered his father's words when he left for college: success without honor is failure in disguise. He'd dismissed it then as immigrant idealism. Now, looking at the evidence of how power corrupted and silence enabled, he understood the true cost of forgetting that lesson. The question wasn't whether to act, but how. The system that had enriched him while destroying families like the Thompsons was deeply entrenched. Any move against it would risk his own position, his company, possibly even his safety. Yet the image of Jamal kneeling in the dust to help a stranger challenged him to remember who he'd once wanted to be. You know what? Jamal's incredible act of kindness deserves a like, but unfortunately he hasn't received the recognition he deserves yet. If you think this young man's pure heart touched your soul, let's show him some love with a simple click of that like button. The modest apartment complex where the Thompsons lived stood in stark contrast to Andrew's usual surroundings. He sat in his Range Rover, now parked across the street, watching residents come and go in the early evening light. Each face told a story of quiet struggle, single mothers returning from double shifts, elderly couples carefully counting coins at the bus stop, teenagers shouldering adult responsibilities far too soon. His initial inquiries had been discreet. A few careful questions to trusted contacts, some deep dives into public records, conversations with former employees of Carter's Automotive. Each thread he pulled revealed a darker pattern beneath the surface of Millbrook's respectable facade. Margaret had compiled a comprehensive dossier on the Thompson family. Sarah Thompson's employment history showed a steady decline from hospital administrator to cleaning service worker, coinciding perfectly with her husband's arrest. Angela's school records revealed a bright student whose opportunities were systematically being stripped away, and Jamal's straight A's despite working 2 jobs, perfect attendance even while supporting his family, glowing recommendations from teachers who noted his exceptional mechanical aptitude. The more Andrew learned, the more the parallels to his own past haunted him. He remembered his mother's tired eyes after 18-hour days at the laundromat, his father's calloused hands sorting other people's clothes. The Thompson struggle wasn't just their story, it was the universal narrative of families fighting against a system designed to keep them down. Through careful observation, he'd learned Jamal's routine. The boy left at dawn for his morning shift, attended school, worked evenings at the diner, and still found time to help neighbors with car repairs in their small garage. His bicycle, carefully maintained despite its age, was his lifeline between these responsibilities. Sarah Thompson's quiet dignity reminded Andrew of his own mother. He'd watched her one morning heading to her cleaning job in a meticulously pressed uniform, head held high despite the whispers that followed her. The coffee tin savings system discovered through careful financial tracking spoke volumes about her determination to give her children a future. The investigation into Michael Thompson's case revealed disturbing irregularities. Key evidence had gone missing. Witness testimonies contained identical phrases, as if scripted. The jury selection process had been unusually rapid. Most telling was the judge's connection to the Carson Group through various property investments, a detail buried in layers of shell companies. Andrew's own complicity in similar systems weighed heavily on him. How many times had he looked the other way when the Carson Group expedited permit processes? How many small businesses had been squeezed out by his company's aggressive expansion policies? The very wealth that allowed him to help now had been built partly on the foundation of others' misfortunes. One evening, he watched Jamal working late in the garage, the boy's dedication evident in every careful movement. A neighbor had brought in an old Chevrolet, barely running but clearly essential to its owner's livelihood. Jamal worked methodically, referring occasionally to a worn notebook that Andrew later learned contained his father's handwritten repair notes. The scene triggered a memory, his father teaching him to press clothes properly, explaining that each garment, no matter how humble, deserved respect and care. "Everything you do carries your signature," he'd said. Make it one you're proud of. Watching Jamal apply the same philosophy to his work, Andrew felt the weight of his own compromise principles. The deeper he dug, the more connections emerged. Robert Carter's garage, just one node in a network of corruption that reached into every corner of Millbrook. Building inspections, health permits, zoning variances, all were weapons in a sophisticated system of control and exploitation. The final piece fell into place during a late-night review of Carter's financial records. Hidden in the maze of transactions was a pattern of payments to offshore accounts, coinciding perfectly with city contract awards. The same accounts showed connections to companies Andrew knew were Carson Group fronts, companies his own firm had done business with. The evidence was damning, but using it would mean exposing his own connections to the corrupt system. Andrew faced a choice: maintain his comfortable position within the machinery of power, risk everything to right a fundamental wrong. The answer, he realized, had been given to him on that dusty roadside, in the simple integrity of a boy who helped a stranger without expectation of reward. The annual Technology and Innovation Summit was Morrison Technology's flagship event, drawing industry leaders and promising talents from across the country. This year, Andrew stood before his executive team, proposing something unprecedented, extending invitations to promising young minds from underprivileged backgrounds, with Jamal Thompson as the keynote example. "Have you lost your mind?" Dad Brandon's voice cut through the ensuing silence. His son, recently appointed to the board at the insistence of major shareholders, sat at the far end of the conference table. We're running a business here, not a charity case reality show." The boardroom erupted in carefully modulated disagreement. Concerns about maintaining the event's prestigious reputation and shareholder expectations filled the air. Andrew watched his son's satisfied smirk grow with each objection raised. The corporate machinery was performing exactly as designed, preserving the status quo, protecting established interests. Margaret, sitting quietly in the corner taking minutes, caught Andrew's eye. She'd helped prepare the proposal, understanding its deeper significance. The summit wasn't just about showcasing technology, it was about opening a door, creating a crack in the system that had kept talented young people like Jamal locked out. The media response was immediate and polarized. Business journals questioned Morrison Technology's departure from its traditional corporate focus. Social media buzzed with speculation about Andrew's motives. Local news outlets, initially hesitant to cover the story given their connections to the Carson Group, found themselves forced to respond to the growing online discussion. Robert Carter's reaction came through back channels, a subtle reminder about mutual interests and community stability. The message was clear: disrupting the established order would have consequences. Andrew's phone filled with messages from Carson Group associates, their concern thinly veiling threats. The pressure extended beyond the professional sphere. Brandon launched a campaign among board members, suggesting his father's judgment was compromised. First this diversity stunt, next he'll be giving away company secrets to every sob story that comes along, he warned in private meetings. The irony of his son using privilege to protect privilege wasn't lost on Andrew. Sarah Thompson's initial response to the summit invitation was cautious skepticism. "Why would someone like you be interested in helping my son?" she asked during Andrew's visit to their apartment. Her protective instinct, honed by years of disappointment and discrimination, saw potential threats in unexpected kindness. Jamal's reaction was different, a mixture of excitement and determination. "This isn't just about me, is it, Mr. Morrison?" he asked quietly, showing insight beyond his years. "You're trying to change something bigger." The boy's perception struck Andrew deeply. In Jamal's eyes, he saw not just hope for a better future, but accountability for his own past actions. The summit preparation became a battlefield of competing interests. Every detail was contested, from Jamal's placement in the program to the security arrangements. Corporate partners threatened to withdraw, citing concerns about the event's changing direction. Longtime allies distanced themselves, sensing a shift in the power dynamics they'd long taken for granted. Yet support emerged from unexpected quarters. Young employees within Morrison Technologies, many from backgrounds similar to Jamal's, began volunteering to help with the summit. Community organizations offered assistance. Even some shareholders, particularly younger ones, expressed enthusiasm for the company's new direction. The cost of this initiative became increasingly personal. Andrew's club memberships were quietly reviewed, social invitations decreased. The comfortable insulation of wealth and privilege began to thin, giving him a taste of the isolation the Thompsons had endured for years. Brandon's final confrontation came late one evening in Andrew's office. "You're destroying everything you built," his son accused. "And for what? Some kid from the wrong side of the tracks who happened to change your tire." The words hung in the air, revealing how far his son had drifted from the values Andrew had failed to instill. "No," Andrew replied, looking at the city lights beyond his window. "I'm remembering who we were supposed to be." The gulf between father and son had never felt wider, yet Andrew felt closer to his own father's principles than he had in decades. As the summit approached, the stakes became clear. This wasn't just about one talented teenager or a corporate event. It was about challenging a system that thrived on exclusion and control. The question wasn't whether there would be consequences, but whether the price of change was finally worth paying. The weeks leading up to the summit transformed Andrew's penthouse office into an unlikely classroom. Twice a week after Jamal's shift at the diner, they would meet to discuss business, technology, and life. The contrast between them, the seasoned CEO in his tailored suits and the teenager in his work-worn clothes, gradually dissolved into something more fundamental: two generations of outsiders trying to navigate a system designed to exclude them. Andrew found himself learning as much as he taught. Jamal's approach to problem-solving, shaped by necessity and limited resources, offered fresh perspectives on challenges Andrew had grown too comfortable approaching conventionally. The boys' questions, unencumbered by corporate politics or market considerations, often cut straight to ethical cores that Andrew had learned to avoid. "Why can't companies just be honest about what they're doing?" Jamal asked one evening, reviewing a particularly convoluted corporate structure. "Wouldn't everyone benefit from more transparency?" The question hung in the air, forcing Andrew to confront the elaborate justifications he'd built around his own business practices. Their sessions often ran late, with Sarah Thompson occasionally joining them. Her initial suspicion of Andrew's motives gradually softened as she observed the genuine connection forming between mentor and mentee. She shared stories of Michael's case's smaller instances of corruption he'd noticed at the garage, attempts to report them through proper channels, the gradual realization that the system itself was compromised. The dynamics within Morrison Technologies shifted subtly. Younger employees began stopping by during these sessions, drawn by the energy and open discussions. Even some older executives, remembering their own early struggles, offered insights and support. Brandon watched it all with growing resentment, seeing his inherited future being reshaped by forces he couldn't control. Jamal's mechanical expertise became a bridge between worlds. He helped Andrew understand the practical implications of their company's automotive software, identifying gaps between engineering theory and repair shop reality. This knowledge proved invaluable in product development meetings, though Brandon made sure credit rarely reached Jamal directly. The relationship deepened beyond business mentorship. Andrew found himself sharing stories of his parents' laundromat, the casual racism they'd endured, the lessons in dignity and perseverance they'd taught him. Jamal, in turn, spoke of his father's principles, the late-night repair sessions in their garage, the community they'd built through small acts of kindness and fair dealing. "Your father taught you more than just mechanics," Andrew observed one evening, watching Jamal methodically diagnose a complex problem in their prototype designs. "He taught you how to maintain your integrity in a world that often demands you compromise it." Sarah's presence during these sessions added layers of perspective. She shared insights from her hospital administration days, depicting how systems supposedly designed to help people often ended up serving institutional interests instead. Her experience paralleled Andrew's own journey from idealistic entrepreneur to compromised corporate player. Their conversations frequently turned to Michael's case, though carefully aware of potential surveillance. Jamal had inherited his father's detailed documentation habits, keeping meticulous records of irregularities he'd noticed at Carter's garage. These records, combined with Andrew's corporate intelligence resources, began forming a clearer picture of the corruption network they were facing. The human cost of their growing alliance became increasingly apparent. Angela reported increased bullying at school, with classmates repeating snippets of adult conversations about her family getting above themselves. Sarah's remaining cleaning clients began finding excuses to discontinue her services. Even Jamal's evening repair customers started dwindling, pressured by subtle community warnings. Yet the mentorship yielded unexpected victories. Jamal's grades, already strong, improved further as Andrew helped him connect academic concepts to real-world applications. His confidence grew, not from arrogance but from the certainty that his father's principles had been right all along. The morning shift manager at the diner, impressed by Jamal's growing business acumen, promoted him to assistant manager. Andrew found himself rediscovering the passion that had driven him in his company's early days. Explaining complex business concepts to Jamal forced him to question practices he'd accepted as necessary evils. The boy's persistent but why challenged him to imagine different ways of achieving success without compromising integrity. Their sessions often ended with practical projects, repairing donated laptops for community centers, developing simplified accounting systems for small businesses, creating basic mechanical training programs. These projects, though small, represent a different kind of corporate engagement with the community, one based on empowerment rather than exploitation. Margaret became an unofficial guardian of these meetings, rearranging Andrew's schedule to protect this time, documenting their discussions and quietly building a network of supporters within the company. Her own daughter, inspired by Jamal's example, started a coding club at her community college. The transformation in both mentor and mentee became increasingly visible. Andrew's board presentation showed a renewed focus on ethical considerations and community impact. Jamal's contributions to their discussions displayed growing sophistication in understanding complex corporate dynamics. Together, they were creating a blueprint for a different kind of success, one that measured wealth not just in dollars but in positive social impact. However, this growth didn't go unnoticed by those with vested interests in maintaining the status quo. The Carson Group's surveillance became more obvious, their warnings more direct. Brandon's opposition evolved from sullen resistance to active sabotage, leaking selective information to shareholders about his father's erratic behavior and questionable associations. Yet each challenge seemed to strengthen the mentor-mentee bond. Andrew saw in Jamal the idealistic young man he'd once been, while Jamal found in Andrew a model for maintaining principles while navigating corporate complexities. Their unlikely partnership was becoming something their opponents feared more than any individual threat, a bridge between worlds that had been deliberately kept apart. The truth about Michael Thompson's case began unraveling during a routine review of old garage records. Jamal, helping organize digital archives at Morrison Technologies, noticed a pattern in Carter's automotive city contracts that didn't match his father's careful documentation. The discrepancies were subtle: inflated labor hours, phantom parts orders, service dates that couldn't possibly align with the garage's staffing records. Andrew's corporate investigative team, initially hesitant to dig into local matters, found themselves drawn into an increasingly complex web. The garage's financial records revealed a sophisticated money laundering operation. City vehicles would come in for routine maintenance, but the billing would reflect major repairs. The excess funds disappeared into a maze of shell companies, eventually flowing into accounts connected to the Carson Group. Dad documented everything, Jamal explained one evening, spreading his father's notebooks across Andrew's desk. He didn't know what he was seeing at first, but he knew something wasn't right. The notebooks contained meticulous records, dates, vehicle numbers, actual repairs performed versus those billed. Michael Thompson hadn't just been an honest mechanic, he'd been unknowingly building a case against the entire corrupt system. Sarah contributed crucial insights from her hospital administration days. The pattern matched what she'd seen in medical supply contracts: inflated invoices, unnecessary services, kickbacks hidden in legitimate-looking transactions. The same names kept appearing: shell companies owned by Carson Group associates, contracts awarded to relatives of city officials, inspection reports signed by compromised regulators. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Margaret discovered a connection between the garage's fraudulent billing and Morrison Technologies' own software. A modified version of their fleet management system was being used to generate false documentation. The realization that his own company's tools were enabling corruption hit Andrew hard. Robert Carter's nervousness became increasingly evident. Security cameras tracked Jamal's movements around the neighborhood more openly. Strange cars parked outside the Thompsons' apartment at odd hours. Anonymous calls to the diner questioned Jamal's honesty. The system was closing ranks, using intimidation tactics refined through years of practice. Brandon, whether through loyalty to the Carson Group or simple spite, began actively undermining the investigation. Crucial files disappeared from company servers. Witnesses suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Project timelines were delayed by technical issues. Each obstruction bore his signature, though always with plausible deniability. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former Carson Group accountant, terminally ill and seeking redemption, reached out through Margaret. His testimony provided the missing links: detailed records of payments, names of compromised officials, dates of key decisions. Most crucially, he revealed how Michael Thompson's arrest had been orchestrated to protect the scheme. They needed someone to take the fall, the accountant explained in a recorded deposition. Thompson was perfect, honest enough to be believable as an embezzler, isolated enough to be vulnerable. They never expected him to have documented everything so carefully. The evidence painted a damning picture. Judge Harrison, who had presided over Michael's trial, owned significant interests in Carson Group properties. The public defender assigned to the case had previous connections to Robert Carter's family. Even the jury selection had been subtly manipulated through data from Morrison Technologies' demographic analysis tools. As the investigation deepened, the personal cost mounted. Sarah lost her remaining cleaning jobs. Angela's scholarship was abruptly revoked. Jamal's evening repair clients received visits from building inspectors. The message was clear: back off or be destroyed. Andrew faced his own pressures. Major shareholders, prompted by Brandon, called for his removal. Business partners delayed contract renewals. The Carson Group's influence touched every aspect of his corporate empire, threatening to dismantle everything he'd built. Yet each revelation strengthened their resolve. Jamal's understanding of mechanical systems helped trace the garage's fraudulent repair records. Sarah's healthcare administration experience exposed similar patterns in other city contracts. Andrew's corporate resources and Margaret's network of contacts helped build an airtight case. The human element of the corruption became increasingly clear. Small business owners paying protection money disguised as consulting fees. City employees forced to overlook violations or lose their pensions. Honest mechanics and administrators pushed out of their jobs for asking too many questions. The system didn't just steal money, it crushed spirits and destroyed lives. The evidence they gathered went far beyond Michael Thompson's case. It exposed a decades-long pattern of systematic corruption that had shaped every aspect of Millbrook's development. Construction contracts, zoning decisions, service agreements, all had been manipulated to benefit a small group of insiders at the community's expense. Andrew realized that his own success had been partly built on this corrupt foundation. Morrison Technologies had benefited from contracts awarded through compromised processes, developments approved through manipulated systems. The investigation wasn't just about clearing Michael Thompson, it was about confronting his own role in perpetuating injustice. As they prepared to act on their findings, the stakes became clear. They weren't just fighting individual corrupt officials or businesses, they were challenging an entire system designed to protect itself. The question wasn't whether there would be retaliation, but whether they had the strength to withstand it. The answer came in quiet moments: Jamal's determined focus as he analyzed records, Sarah's dignified resilience in the face of increasing pressure, Margaret's steady support in coordinating their efforts. Together they had built something stronger than the corruption they faced, a coalition of people committed to truth regardless of the cost. The Morrison Technologies Innovation Summit transformed the city's convention center into a showcase of corporate power and technological advancement. Sleek displays highlighted cutting-edge innovations, while industry leaders mingled with potential investors. Yet beneath the polished surface, tension crackled like static electricity before a storm. Jamal stood at the center of it all, his simple black suit borrowed from a neighbor, a stark contrast to the designer wear surrounding him. Andrew had positioned him as the keynote speaker, not just a token of diversity, but a direct challenge to the system that had tried to silence his family. The boy's presence was itself an accusation, his very survival a testimony to resilience in the face of systematic oppression. Brandon's attempts to sabotage the event had grown increasingly desperate. First came the technical difficulties with Jamal's presentation materials, quickly resolved by the young tech team that had rallied around him. Then the last-minute schedule changes, meant to minimize his impact, thwarted by Margaret's quiet efficiency. Finally, rumors about his family's criminal connections, which only served to draw more attention to the upcoming speech. The Carson Group's representatives sat in the front row, their casual poses belying their tight control of the room. Robert Carter had chosen to attend personally, perhaps believing his presence would intimidate the Thompson family into silence. City officials, business leaders, and media representatives filled the auditorium, drawn by whispers of impending controversy. Sarah Thompson sat proudly in the front row, wearing the same dignified expression she'd maintained through years of hardship. Angela, beside her, clutched a folder containing copies of their evidence, insurance against any attempt to silence their truth. The entire Thompson family had arrived early, passing through unusually thorough security checks, aware that their every movement was being monitored. Andrew stood at the podium, his opening remarks carefully crafted to set the stage. Innovation, he began, isn't just about technology. It's about challenging systems that no longer serve humanity. It's about having the courage to question not just how we do things, but why we do them. The atmosphere shifted as he introduced Jamal. The boy approached the podium with the same quiet confidence he'd shown that day on the roadside. His presentation began not with technology, but with a simple statement: "My father taught me that every broken system can be fixed if you're willing to look honestly at what's wrong." What followed was a masterclass in controlled demolition of corruption. Using Morrison Technology's own data analysis tools, Jamal methodically exposed the patterns of fraud centered around Carter's automotive. Each slide connected to larger systemic issues: bid rigging in city contracts, manipulated inspection reports, strategic bankruptcy filings. The evidence was presented not with anger, but with the precise, methodical approach of a skilled mechanic diagnosing a complex problem. The Carson Group representatives shifted uncomfortably as their own data was used against them. Robert Carter's face darkened with each revelation. Brandon, seated among the board members, watched his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. Halfway through the presentation, the power went out, a last desperate attempt at suppression. Without missing a beat, Jamal continued speaking in the darkness, his voice carrying the weight of years of injustice. "This is what they do," he said calmly. "They try to keep us in the dark. But we've lived in darkness for so long, we've learned to see clearly through it." When emergency power restored the lights minutes later, the dynamic in the room had shifted. The audience was no longer passive observers, but witnesses to a momentous unveiling. Journalists furiously took notes. Law enforcement officials present for routine security found themselves documenting criminal allegations. The presentation reached its crescendo with the evidence of Michael Thompson's wrongful conviction. Jamal's voice caught slightly as he displayed his father's meticulous records alongside the falsified evidence used to convict him. "They didn't just steal years from my father's life," he said. "They tried to steal our belief in justice itself." Andrew watched from the side, seeing not just Jamal but shadows of his own younger self, the son of immigrants who'd believed in the system's fairness until confronted with its fundamental corruption. The boy's composure, his refusal to be silenced, represented everything Andrew had originally built his company to champion. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Carson Group representatives hurried out, phones pressed to their ears. Robert Carter attempted to interrupt, claiming misunderstandings and out-of-context data, but his protest sounded hollow against the weight of evidence. Brandon stormed out, his face a mask of fury and fear. As Jamal concluded, the convention center erupted not in polite applause but in the thunderous acknowledgement of truth spoken to power. Sarah Thompson wept silently, years of suppressed emotion finally finding release. Angela stood beside her mother, head high, documenting every reaction with her phone. But it was the quiet conversations afterward that truly marked the day's impact. Small business owners sharing similar stories of extortion. City employees stepping forward with collaborative evidence. Young professionals offering legal and technical support to expand the investigation. The presentation hadn't just exposed corruption, it had broken the spell of inevitability that protected it. In showing how the system worked, Jamal had revealed its vulnerabilities. In demonstrating his own resilience, he had inspired others to resist. Andrew knew the real battle was just beginning. The Carson Group wouldn't fall without a fight. Brandon's betrayal would have professional and personal consequences. The system would attempt to reassert control through 1,000 small acts of retaliation. Yet watching Jamal field questions with quiet confidence, seeing the network of support already forming around him, Andrew felt something he hadn't experienced since his company's earliest days: the pure satisfaction of standing openly for what was right, regardless of the cost. In the days following the summit, events unfolded with dizzying speed. Federal investigators, alerted by the public nature of Jamal's revelations, descended on Millbrook. The Carson Group's carefully constructed facade began cracking under scrutiny, revealing decades of systematic corruption that had shaped the city's development. Andrew found himself navigating treacherous waters. Major shareholders, led by Brandon, called for an emergency board meeting to discuss his removal. Business partners, caught between old loyalties and public pressure, hedged their commitments. The corporate empire he'd built seemed to be crumbling, yet Andrew felt strangely liberated. "They're trying to freeze our accounts," Margaret reported one morning, her usual calm demeanor strained. "Brandon's using his position to block access to company resources." The betrayal cut deep, but it also confirmed their suspicions about how deeply the corruption had infiltrated Morrison Technologies itself. Sarah Thompson faced her own battles. Anonymous threats arrived daily. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. The local bank suddenly recalled their modest mortgage, citing regulatory concerns. Yet she stood firm, her dignity intact, supporting Jamal's increasingly public role in the investigation. The legal team they assembled worked around the clock, converting Jamal's mechanical precision with evidence into courtroom ammunition. Michael Thompson's case became the key to unraveling larger patterns of corruption. His detailed records, combined with the Carson Group whistleblower's testimony, provided a roadmap through the labyrinth of fraudulent transactions. Robert Carter's attempt to flee the country was thwarted at the airport, his hastily packed bags containing hard drives that would later prove crucial to the investigation. His arrest triggered a cascade of revelations as lower-level participants rushed to make deals with prosecutors. The garage's former employees came forward with additional evidence, their silence finally broken by the prospect of immunity. The city government underwent a seismic shift. The deputy mayor resigned, citing health concerns. Building inspectors, code enforcement officers, and contract administrators were placed on administrative leave. Each day brought new revelations of how deeply the corruption had penetrated Millbrook's civic infrastructure. Jamal's role evolved from whistleblower to symbol of resistance. Other families stepped forward with similar stories of false accusations and systematic intimidation. The boys' methodical approach to exposing corruption became a template for citizen investigators across the city. Local computer science students created databases to track suspicious patterns in city contracts. Brandon's final confrontation with his father took place in the Morrison Technologies boardroom. "You've destroyed everything," he accused, his voice shaking with rage. "All your work, my inheritance, our family's reputation gone because you couldn't leave well enough alone." Andrew's response was quiet but firm. "I'm restoring our family's true inheritance, the values your grandparents taught me about honor and justice. Something I failed to teach you. The gulf between them seemed unbridgeable, a casualty of the very system Andrew had helped perpetuate." The federal investigation expanded beyond Millbrook, following money trails to other cities and states. The Carson Group's network of influence proved more extensive than anyone had imagined. Each new revelation validated Michael Thompson's initial suspicions and justified his careful documentation of seemingly minor discrepancies. Sarah's position at the center of events proved crucial. Her experience in hospital administration helped investigators understand how medical supply contracts had been manipulated. Her network of cleaning staff provided evidence of document destruction and after-hours meetings. Her quiet strength inspired other witnesses to come forward. The community began to heal slowly and unevenly. Small business owners formed support networks to resist intimidation. Citizen oversight committees sprang up to monitor city contracts. Young people, inspired by Jamal's example, began investigating career paths in law enforcement and public service. Morrison Technologies itself underwent transformation. Young employees, emboldened by recent events, pushed for ethical business practices and community engagement. The board, under public pressure, approved new transparency measures. Even some longtime executives, remembering their own early ideals, joined the reform efforts. The pursuit of justice exacted its price. Andrew's personal fortune diminished as legal costs mounted and business partnerships dissolved. The Thompson family faced ongoing harassment and economic pressure. Jamal's college prospects, despite his stellar record, were complicated by powerful enemies. Yet each setback seemed to strengthen their resolve. Andrew rediscovered the entrepreneurial spirit that had driven his early success, now focused on building ethical business models. Sarah's quiet leadership united diverse community groups in support of reform. Jamal's determination inspired a new generation to challenge systemic corruption. The investigation became a template for similar efforts nationwide. Other communities, recognizing familiar patterns of corruption, sought guidance from the Millbrook example. Jamal's methodical approach to gathering and presenting evidence was studied in law schools and journalism programs. As federal indictments were handed down and plea deals negotiated, the true scope of their achievement became clear. They hadn't just exposed a corrupt system, they had demonstrated that ordinary people, armed with truth and determination, could successfully challenge entrenched power. Let's stand together for truth and justice, just like Jamal and Andrew did. Every channel subscription represents another voice against corruption. If this story touched your heart, join our community by hitting that subscribe button. Together we can make a difference, one story at a time. The first warning came in the form of smoke rising from Jamal's community vocational center at dawn. The fire, strategically set to destroy records while causing maximum symbolic damage, consumed not just the building but the hopes of dozens of young students who had found purpose there. Firefighters called it an electrical fault, though the pattern of destruction told a different story. Brandon's corporate coup proceeded with surgical precision. Key executives, faced with mysteriously resurfaced scandals from their pasts, withdrew their support from Andrew. The board, citing fiduciary responsibility, suspended his voting rights pending investigation. Morrison Technologies, the company he'd built from nothing, was slipping from his grasp. Sarah Thompson arrived home one evening to find their apartment ransacked. Family photos were shattered, Michael's notebooks scattered, and a single message spray painted on the wall, "Know your place." The police report classified it as routine burglary, despite nothing of value being taken. The real message was clear: their pursuit of justice had put everything they loved at risk. The Carson Group's retaliation extended beyond physical intimidation. Local banks suddenly recalled loans to businesses associated with the investigation. Insurance premiums for supportive companies skyrocketed. Long-standing contracts were canceled without explanation. The economic noose tightened around the neck of anyone who dared stand with the Thompsons. Angela's school life became unbearable. Teachers who had once praised her work now found constant fault. Former friends, their parents fearful of association, left her isolated. Her artwork, once displayed proudly in school hallways, disappeared overnight. The systematic dismantling of a young girl's world served as a brutal reminder of power's reach. The media narrative began to shift. Anonymous sources questioned Jamal's credibility. Opinion pieces suggested Andrew's mental stability had been compromised by personal troubles. The Carson Group's extensive network of influence worked overtime to reshape public perception, turning whistleblowers into attention seekers and truth-tellers into troublemakers. Margaret, Andrew's loyal assistant, was hospitalized after a suspicious car accident. Though she survived, the message to other potential witnesses was clear. The investigation support network began to fray as fear overcame conscience. Even federal investigators found their efforts hampered by suddenly uncooperative witnesses and missing evidence. The vocational center's destruction hit Jamal hardest. He had poured his heart into creating a space where young people could learn trades without fear of exploitation. Standing in the ashes, he found the charred remains of his father's notebook, a deliberate touch meant to break his spirit. The sight of those burned pages containing years of his father's wisdom and observations nearly succeeded. Financial pressure mounted relentlessly. Andrew's personal accounts were frozen pending regulatory review. The Thompson family's modest savings disappeared in a maze of legal fees and unexpected expenses. Sarah's remaining clients received anonymous dossiers detailing her family's criminal connections. The systematic destruction of their economic foundation proceeded with ruthless efficiency. Community support, initially strong, began to waver under sustained pressure. Local businesses that had offered jobs to vocational center students found themselves facing surprise health inspections. Churches that had provided meeting spaces received visits from tax auditors. The message spread: solidarity had a price, and it would be collected in full. Brandon's triumph in the boardroom felt complete when he was named interim CEO. His first action was to announce a strategic reorganization that eliminated positions held by Andrew's supporters. The company's ethical initiatives were quietly shelved, replaced by aggressive expansion plans that bore the Carson Group's fingerprints. The legal battle for Michael Thompson's exoneration stalled as key evidence became mysteriously inadmissible. Witnesses recanted their statements, citing memory concerns. The judge assigned to review the case had unexpected conflicts of interest arise. The machinery of justice, already slow, ground to a near halt under the weight of systemic resistance. Each morning brought new challenges. Security cameras at the Thompsons' apartment malfunctioned during acts of vandalism. Angela's scholarship applications were lost in administrative limbo. Jamal's college acceptance letters were followed by notices of financial aid complications. The systematic dismantling of their future proceeded with clockwork precision. The toll showed in small ways. Sarah's proud posture began to slope under invisible weights. Jamal's confident smile appeared less frequently. Andrew's hair grayed noticeably at the temples. Even Margaret, from her hospital bed, showed signs of wear in her usually unshakable determination. Yet in their darkest moments, they found strength in unexpected places. Anonymous donations helped rebuild the vocational center. Community members offered their homes for meetings. Young lawyers volunteered their services. The very pressure meant to break them created bonds of solidarity that would prove crucial in the battles ahead. The weight of constant resistance began to take its toll. Jamal found himself staring at his father's charred notebook late one night, questioning whether their fight for justice was worth the devastation it had brought to everyone who supported them. The vocational center's ruins stood as a monument to the price of defiance, and each passing day brought new evidence of the system's determination to crush them. In his temporary office, a far cry from his former corporate suite, Andrew faced his own demons. Brandon's successful coup had stripped him not just of his company but of his identity as a business leader. The betrayal cut deeper than mere financial loss. It represented the failure of his most fundamental duty as a father. Watching his son embrace the very corruption he fought against felt like watching his own past sins come home to roost. Sarah Thompson's breaking point came quietly one evening. After another day of doors closing in her face, another stack of bills she couldn't pay, she sat alone in their kitchen, holding the empty coffee tin that had once held her children's college savings. The simple dream of giving her children a better future seemed to crumble in her hands. For the first time since Michael's arrest, she allowed herself to weep, her tears falling silently in the darkness. The community's resolve began to fracture. Longtime supporters, faced with escalating pressure, started to distance themselves. The local pastor who had offered them meeting space apologized with downcast eyes, citing congregation concerns. Small business owners who had employed vocational center students found reasons to lay them off. The isolation grew more profound with each defection. Angela's art teacher found her hiding in the supply closet during lunch, trying to escape the whispers and pointed fingers. The bright, confident girl who had once filled sketchbooks with dreams of the future now drew only in shades of gray. Her silence at family dinners spoke volumes about the weight children bear when adults wage their wars. Even Margaret, recovering in the hospital, showed signs of wavering. Maybe she suggested during one of Andrew's visits we could find another way. A compromise. The words hung in the air like surrender, coming from the woman who had stood unwavering through decades of corporate battles. Her injuries and the subsequent isolation had worn down even her legendary resilience. The federal investigation stalled completely. Key witnesses disappeared or changed their stories. Critical documents vanished from evidence lockers. The lead investigator was reassigned to a distant field office, his replacement showing markedly less interest in pursuing the case. The machinery of justice, already compromised, ground to a complete halt. Jamal's college acceptance letters, once a source of pride, now mocked him from his bedroom wall. Each one came with wonderful promises and impossible conditions. The message was clear: his academic future would be sacrificed on the altar of his principles. Late at night, he caught himself wondering if his father would have wanted their entire family ground down for the sake of truth. The psychological warfare intensified. Anonymous letters detailed their daily routines with disturbing accuracy. Photos arrived showing family members in unguarded moments. Every phone call, every email, every conversation seemed monitored. The constant surveillance created a suffocating atmosphere of vulnerability and exposure. Brandon's triumph seemed complete when he announced Morrison Technology's new partnership with the Carson Group. The press release, filled with corporate doublespeak about synergistic opportunities, represented everything they had fought against. Watching his son dismantle his life's work piece by piece, Andrew faced the bitter reality that some betrayals can never be undone. In their darkest moment, gathered in their small apartment, each member of their unlikely alliance confronted their own version of defeat. Sarah's quiet dignity seemed close to breaking. Angela's artistic spirit dimmed further each day. Margaret's legendary efficiency gave way to hesitation and doubt. Even Jamal's determination showed cracks under the relentless pressure. The question hung unspoken in the air: had they reached the limit of their resistance? The system they fought seemed not just corrupt but invincible, capable of crushing any opposition through 1,000 small cuts. The cost of their principles, measured in lost opportunities, broken relationships, and shattered dreams, seemed suddenly, overwhelmingly high. Yet in that moment of near surrender, as they sat together in shared silence, something unexpected began to take shape. Perhaps it was the memory of Michael Thompson's unwavering integrity, or the weight of all those who had sacrificed before them, or simply the human spirit's deep resistance to injustice. Whatever the source, they found themselves drawing strength from their very despair, forging their darkest moment into something harder than steel. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Late one night, a junior employee at Morrison Technologies discovered an encrypted server that Brandon had overlooked in his purge of company records. The files, automatically backed up through a legacy system Andrew had installed years ago, contained a treasure trove of documented corruption spanning decades. Among the recovered data was a series of emails between Brandon and Robert Carter, detailing not just the frame-up of Michael Thompson, but the systematic suppression of evidence that would have exonerated him. Each message, arrogant in its assumption of permanent secrecy, provided a damning timeline of corruption. Brandon's early involvement, even while in college, revealed how deeply the rot had set into the next generation. The whistleblower, a young woman named Rachel Chin, had her own reasons for coming forward. "My parents were small business owners," she told them, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "The Carson Group destroyed them through the same tactics they're using against you. They never found anyone willing to fight back her testimony, combined with the technical evidence she provided, created the first crack in the wall of silence." As federal investigators sifted through the data, a broader pattern emerged. The corruption wasn't limited to Carter's Garage or Morrison Technologies, it extended into every corner of Millbrook's civic life. Building permits, health inspections, school contracts, even charity fundraisers had been manipulated to benefit the Carson Group's interests. The scale of the fraud was staggering, but more shocking was the casual brutality with which lives had been destroyed to maintain it. Margaret, still recovering but reinvigorated by the new evidence, coordinated a network of former employees willing to testify. Each brought pieces of the puzzle: accounting discrepancies, altered records, witnessed conversations. The pattern of corruption, once obscured by complexity, became clear through their collective testimony. The encrypted files revealed something else: Brandon's own vulnerability. His rise through the company hadn't been based on merit but on carefully orchestrated manipulation. The Carson Group had groomed him from an early age, using him as their tool to control Morrison Technologies. The evidence showed how they had exploited his resentment of his father, nurturing it into full-blown betrayal. Security camera footage, supposedly destroyed during the vocational center fire, had been automatically uploaded to cloud storage. The videos showed Carson Group associates methodically setting the blaze, taking special care to destroy Michael Thompson's notebooks. Their faces, clear in the pre-dawn light, matched perfectly with individuals implicated in the encrypted files. Sarah Thompson's hospital records from her former administration days proved crucial. Her meticulous documentation of supply chain irregularities, preserved despite attempts to purge them, provided a template for tracking similar fraud across other institutions. The systematic nature of the corruption became undeniable through her organizational expertise. Robert Carter's desperation grew visible as the evidence mounted. His attempted flight had been prompted by knowledge of the backup server's existence. Now, faced with undeniable proof of his crimes, he began reaching out through intermediaries, offering to testify against his former associates in exchange for leniency. The technical evidence was damning, but it was the human testimony that proved most powerful. Former employees of Carter's Garage, no longer afraid of retaliation, came forward with stories of being forced to falsify repair records. City clerks described late-night document alterations. Even Carson Group members, sensing the shifting tide, began providing information to protect themselves. Jamal's role in analyzing the evidence proved crucial. His mechanical knowledge, combined with his understanding of garage operations, helped investigators understand exactly how the fraud had been perpetrated. Each repair order he reviewed revealed new layers of deception, confirming his father's original suspicions. The most shocking revelation came from Brandon's own emails. In moments of unguarded communication with Carson Group members, he had boasted about using his father's teachings against him. "The old man taught me to look for weaknesses in any system," he wrote. He never realized he was the biggest weakness in his own. As the evidence accumulated, the mood in Millbrook began to shift. Those who had distanced themselves from the Thompsons cautiously renewed contact. Anonymous support became public solidarity. The wall of silence, maintained for so long through fear and corruption, began to crumble under the weight of undeniable truth. Andrew, reviewing the evidence in his temporary office, felt a complex mixture of vindication and grief. The proof of his son's betrayal was complete, but so was the validation of his decision to stand with the Thompsons. Justice, it seemed, demanded both triumph and sacrifice. The federal prosecutors moved with swift precision once the evidence was secured. Dawn raids across Millbrook caught Carson Group members off guard, their complacency shattered by the synchronized arrests. Robert Carter, attempting a second flight, was apprehended at a private airfield, his briefcase containing additional evidence that would prove vital to the prosecution. Brandon's arrest, broadcast live on local news, marked a dramatic fall from corporate grace. The interim CEO was led from Morrison Technologies in handcuffs, his carefully cultivated image of business prodigy crumbling before the cameras. His last glance at his father, a mixture of defiance and desperate fear, spoke volumes about the personal tragedy underlying their corporate war. The exoneration of Michael Thompson proceeded with remarkable speed once the full evidence was presented. The judge, faced with irrefutable proof of corruption in the original trial, vacated the conviction immediately. After 2 years of wrongful imprisonment, Michael Thompson walked free into the arms of his family, his dignity intact despite everything the system had done to break it. The reunion at the prison gates became a symbol of vindication. Sarah's quiet strength, Jamal's unwavering determination, and Angela's restored spirit all found expression in that moment of embrace. Michael's first words to his son, "You did good, boy," acknowledged not just the fight for justice, but the man Jamal had become in the process. Corporate reform swept through Morrison Technologies like a cleansing fire. Andrew, reinstated as CEO by a chastened board, implemented comprehensive anti-corruption measures. The company's transformation from enabler of corruption to model of corporate responsibility became a case study in ethical business practices. Young executives, inspired by the changes, developed new protocols for community engagement and transparency. The impact rippled through Millbrook's civic institutions. City contracts underwent independent audits. Building inspections were overseen by citizen committees. School boards opened their meetings to public scrutiny. The systems of control and intimidation, maintained for so long through secrecy and fear, crumbled in the face of renewed civic engagement. Rachel Chin's courage in coming forward inspired others. A wave of whistleblowers emerged from various institutions, each contributing to the dismantling of corrupt networks. The young professional's example showed that one person's commitment to truth could catalyze widespread change. The vocational center rose again, rebuilt through community effort and corporate donations. Its new facilities, designed with input from both students and local businesses, became a model for ethical job training. Michael Thompson, restored to his role as head instructor, found his teaching methods in high demand as other communities sought to replicate their success. Sarah's expertise in hospital administration proved invaluable in redesigning oversight systems. Her experience with both corruption and reform made her a sought-after consultant for institutions seeking to protect themselves against similar schemes. The woman who had once cleaned offices to survive now helped shape institutional policy. The Carson Group's collapse revealed the hollow nature of their power. Without the ability to intimidate and corrupt, their business empire proved unsustainable. Former victims of their schemes came forward with civil suits, ensuring that justice would have both criminal and financial components. Angela's artwork, once suppressed, found new expression in a series of powerful pieces about justice and redemption. Her school, chastened by its earlier treatment of her, established a scholarship in her name for students who demonstrated moral courage in facing adversity. The federal investigation expanded beyond Millbrook, following leads to similar corruption networks in other cities. The methods developed to expose and dismantle the Carson Group's operations became a template for anti-corruption efforts nationwide. Jamal's systematic approach to gathering and analyzing evidence was adopted by investigative teams across the country. Brandon's guilty plea, negotiated in exchange for cooperation, highlighted the generational nature of corruption and the possibility of redemption. His testimony helped expose similar grooming operations in other companies, preventing the creation of future corporate conspirators. The transformation of Morrison Technologies proved that ethical business practices could coexist with profitability. Under Andrew's renewed leadership, the company's commitment to community development and transparent operations attracted a new generation of investors and partners who shared their values. As justice took its course, the Thompson family found their position in the community permanently altered. No longer victims or outcasts, they became symbols of the power of principled resistance. Michael's return to teaching, Sarah's role in institutional reform, and Jamal's continued advocacy for transparency ensured that their story would inspire others facing similar battles. The final victory wasn't just in the courts or corporate boardrooms, it was in the restored faith of a community that had rediscovered its power to fight corruption. The legacy of their struggle became a reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, becomes unstoppable when ordinary people refuse to surrender their dignity and truth. 5 years after the Carson Group's collapse, Millbrook had transformed into a model of civic renewal. The Vocational Center, now expanded into the Thompson Institute for Technical Excellence, stood as a beacon of hope where Michael Thompson's philosophy of honest craftsmanship merged with cutting-edge education. Students from across the country sought admission, drawn by its unique blend of technical training and ethical business practices. Jamal, graduating summa cum laude from MIT's engineering program, returned to Millbrook not as a prodigal son but as a leader in his own right. His senior thesis, developing software to detect patterns of corporate fraud, had already been adopted by regulatory agencies nationwide. The boy who once fixed cars in a small garage now led a team developing systems to protect communities from institutional corruption. Sarah Thompson's journey from cleaning lady to policy consultant exemplified the community's transformation. Her experience navigating both poverty and systemic corruption made her an invaluable advisor to institutions implementing reform measures. The quiet dignity that had sustained her through years of hardship now commanded respect in corporate boardrooms and government offices. Andrew Morrison's evolution proved equally profound. Rather than retiring after the crisis, he redirected Morrison Technologies toward ethical innovation and community development. The company's new mission statement, "Technology in Service of Truth," reflected lessons learned through FIRE. Young employees, attracted by its commitment to ethical practices, brought fresh energy and ideas to the reformed corporation. Angela's artistic career blossomed in unexpected ways. Her exhibitions exploring themes of justice and redemption drew national attention. The school that had once shunned her now hosted her Artist in Residence program, where she helped young people express their own experiences of systemic change through art. Michael Thompson's return to teaching transformed technical education in Millbrook. His curriculum, combining mechanical expertise with ethical decision-making, became a model for vocational programs nationwide. The garage where he had once discovered corruption now served as a hands-on classroom where students learned not just how to fix engines, but how to maintain their integrity in a challenging world. The Thompson Institute's impact extended beyond technical training. Its business ethics program, developed in partnership with Morrison Technologies, helped companies implement anti-corruption measures. Regular seminars brought together business leaders, community activists, and government officials to discuss sustainable development and corporate responsibility. Rachel Chin's whistleblowing inspired a new generation of corporate watchdogs. The 8th department she now headed at Morrison Technologies became known for its innovative approach to transparency and data security. Young professionals sought positions there, attracted by its reputation for ethical technology development. The transformation affected even those who had opposed them. Former Carson Group associates, after serving their sentences, found opportunities for redemption through the Institute's rehabilitation program. Some became its strongest advocates, using their experience to help others recognize and resist corrupt practices. Brandon's story took an unexpected turn. After his release from prison, he began working with youth anti-corruption programs, sharing his experience as a cautionary tale. The relationship with his father remained complex, but their shared commitment to preventing others from following his path created a foundation for healing. Community engagement flourished under the new paradigm. Regular town halls, transparent budget meetings, and citizen oversight committees ensured that power remained accountable to the people. The culture of fear and silence that had protected corruption gave way to open dialogue and collaborative problem-solving. Morrison Technology's ethical business model proved surprisingly profitable. Companies seeking to implement similar reforms created a new market for their consulting services and compliance software. The corporation that had once enabled corruption now led the movement for corporate responsibility. The Thompson family's influence extended far beyond Millbrook. Their story, documented in case studies and featured in media coverage, inspired similar movements in other communities. Jamal's frequent speaking engagements at universities and business schools helped shape a new generation's understanding of corporate ethics. Sarah's cleaning cooperative started to provide opportunities for other struggling families, grew into a successful enterprise known for fair labor practices and worker empowerment. The women who had once worked in isolation now owned shares in a company that prioritized dignity and fair compensation. Michael's reputation for integrity, once used against him, became his greatest asset. Corporate boards sought his advice on implementing ethical oversight. Government agencies consulted him on regulatory reform. The principles he had refused to compromise now shaped policy at the highest levels. The Institute's annual ethics conference, drawing participants from around the world, became a catalyst for global change. Each year, new stories emerged of communities using the Millbrook model to challenge corrupt systems and rebuild on foundations of transparency and justice. 10 years after the watershed events that transformed Millbrook, the ripple effects continued to spread. The Thompson Institute had grown into a sprawling campus, its modern buildings a testament to the power of perseverance and principles. Each morning, students from diverse backgrounds gathered in classrooms where technical expertise and ethical leadership were taught as inseparable companions. The Institute's Legal Aid Foundation, established through Andrew Morrison's initial endowment, provided support for whistleblowers and anti-corruption activists nationwide. Its team of dedicated lawyers, many of them inspired by the Thompson family's story, worked tirelessly to protect those who dared to challenge corrupt systems. The foundation's success rate in whistleblower protection cases set new legal precedents. Jamal's mentorship program became a cornerstone of the Institute's mission. Young people facing similar challenges to those he had encountered found guidance and support through a network of successful professionals who understood their struggles. The program's graduates went on to leadership positions in business, government, and education, creating a multiplier effect of positive change. Sarah Thompson's legacy extended beyond her role in exposing corruption. Her work with immigrant and low-income communities created pathways to economic independence for thousands of families. The cleaning cooperative model she developed was replicated in cities across the country, proving that ethical business practices could uplift entire communities. The Morrison Technologies Ethics Division, under Rachel Chen's leadership, continued pushing boundaries in corporate transparency. Their blockchain-based accountability systems and fraud detection algorithms became industry standards. The company's annual Truth in Technology conference drew innovators committed to using technological advancement for social good. Michael Thompson's automotive program evolved into a comprehensive technical education center. Students learned not just mechanical skills, but environmental responsibility and sustainable practices. The garage that had once been a site of corruption now produced certified ethical mechanics who carried his principles into workshops across the country. Angela's art therapy program helped survivors of systemic oppression find their voice. Her workshops, combining creative expression with advocacy skills, empowered participants to tell their stories and contribute to social change. The annual exhibition of student work became a powerful testament to the healing power of art and justice. Brandon's redemption story, though complex, added an important dimension to the Institute's message. His regular sessions with business students, brutally honest about his fall from grace, helped future leaders understand the subtle ways corruption can corrupt the soul. His ongoing journey toward redemption demonstrated that change was possible even for those who had chosen wrong paths. The Institute's research department, collaborating with universities worldwide, continued documenting cases of corporate corruption and successful reform efforts. Their findings informed policy decisions and corporate governance structures, creating a growing body of knowledge about institutional transformation. Community engagement remained central to the Institute's mission. Regular forums brought together diverse stakeholders to address emerging challenges. The transparent decision-making processes developed in Millbrook became a model for participatory governance in other communities. The Thompson family's annual reunion, once a private celebration of survival, grew into a gathering of change-makers from around the world. People came to share stories, strategies, and hope, leaving renewed in their commitment to fighting corruption in their own communities. Morrison Technology's transformation proved lasting. The company's ethical business practices attracted a new generation of investors interested in both profit and social impact. Their success demonstrated that corporate responsibility and financial success could go hand in hand. The Institute's scholarship program, funded by recovered corruption assets, provided opportunities for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Each recipient carried forward the legacy of resistance and renewal that had begun with one family's stand against injustice. International partnerships expanded the Institute's influence globally. Delegations from developing nations studied the Millbrook model, adapting its principles to their own anti-corruption efforts. The Thompson name became synonymous with ethical reform and community empowerment worldwide. As Millbrook approached the decade mark of its transformation, new challenges emerged. But the foundations built through struggle and sacrifice proved strong. The culture of transparency and accountability, once established, resisted attempts to return to old ways. The story of the Thompsons and their allies became part of the curriculum in business schools and public policy programs. Students analyzed not just the mechanics of exposing corruption, but the moral courage required to stand against it. Looking toward the future, the Institute continued evolving. New programs addressed emerging forms of corruption in the digital age. Research projects explored the intersection of technology, ethics, and human dignity. The next generation of leaders, trained in both technical skills and moral principles, stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The legacy lived on not just in buildings and programs, but in the countless lives transformed by the example of one family's refusal to accept injustice. Their story reminded future generations that the most powerful force for change was not wealth or position, but the unwavering commitment to truth and dignity in the face of corruption. Wow, what an incredible journey we've shared together. If this story of courage, justice, and redemption touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button to join our storytelling family and be the first to know when Part 2 drops. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this powerful message of hope. Drop a comment below. I'd love to know which moment moved you the most. Was it Jamal's bravery, Sarah's strength, or Andrew's transformation? Let's build a community of people who believe in the power of truth and justice. Don't forget to smash that like button. It helps us reach more people with stories that matter. Ready for Part 2? Let us know in the comments.